maybe just on the ground, and he has to pay Shalom Yishalom Hamavar Esabad. This just should be paid by the person, although he's not there, he's someplace else, he would say, yeah, it's my property, I did whatever I want with my property. It doesn't work that way. He has to pay, although it went the fire from his property to someone else's property, since he was the one who lighted the fire, made the fire, and he has to pay. So the Recham HaKodesh, it's a little long, I'm trying to go briefly from one piece to the other, but he starts asking, Kasha, why does it say Tzaitza, why does it say this word and that word, why does it say Imotze, it is found. So he starts saying, in the answer he starts saying, we see that the Torah wants to be Merames, wants to hint to us, Tirmez HaTorah, Aisa say Yishovi v'Yerushuim b'Rishon. When we have the bad people doing bad things, we should understand what happens as a result from their bad things. Kedaishi is oirer udam, so that a person should awaken with tardaimus, shines sichlo, from the, which is saying in the beginning, when we say the words also, just try to say without the words, which will go too fast, but the beginning is a very enthusiastic words. I want to say the words of the Recham HaKodesh. Kedaishi is oirer udam, a person should awaken himself with tardaimus, shines sichlo, from the falling asleep of his cycle, ba'avitoi, when he should start looking at flugas or ruos, how badness would be from what he's doing, not only to himself, as yuri the oilam, what he's bringing to the world. Because not only to the Rishon themselves he would be doing bad, but also he would also be doing bad to the whole world. And this is what the Torah is saying, Kisai Tzayash. And he starts saying, you should know that the bad times for all the people is called in the name of Aish, fire. And we see this from Gabriel, that the Gemara says that when we see in Tanakh that there was supposed to be something bad going out in Nevi'ah, from the prophets they're saying Nevi'ah, so we see that they called it, there went out fire from the Keruvim, from the Beis HaMikdash, and that's called Tagboris Hadinim. And it says Vayte B'umotza Koitzem, this catches on to twigs. This is the Rishuim. On whom does it catch on? This fire, this catches on to twigs, meaning the Rishuim, bad people, which aren't anything to the world, only bad people that are just throwing pointy objects on the whole world. So that's why they're called as twigs or thorns. That's why it's called Metziyat. It went out. Why? Because a bad person, a Rusha, he's not limited. He's someone that we can't be called, he doesn't go into the regular limitations of people or anyone that should boss around him, because he doesn't take any bossing. He does whatever he wants. And more than that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't call himself his king. He takes away his reigning over him. He says, I'm not going to help you either, to this Rusha, to this someone who's just out to do bad to himself and to the world. And the Pusik wants to add on and say that after the fire has its permission to go out, then don't think that it's only going to be something that bad people will have from this badness. It's also the good people also. I want to stop for a moment and say a word that I heard from Rabbi Victor Miller, a very important lesson. And this is something that we have to understand, realistically speaking, what happened by the Second World War. It's not only then, it's also by the Crusades and a lot of other times. When we always want to speak about the early ages, we like to speak good in general. They were very nice people, good people. True. No one's taking that away. Because the Vadrega of the good people were much in a higher level than we are today. But still, the reason things happened wasn't because of good things that they did. And no one should think it's like an accident that happened. And he says, don't fool me because I was there. That's what because I was there, and I'll tell you, he gives a lot of parables. He says there wasn't even one Jewish paper, and all the papers were against. He said more than that. He said that in Germany, that where it was, they had full control, that was the worst place of assimilation. And he gives examples and things to explain that. And then in Poland, it wasn't as bad as Germany, but it was the majority was just going downhill, not downhill, down wall. He says, because it was open dances between men and women in the streets. It was mamish. It wasn't. A little, if Hitler would come a little later, he said he wouldn't have him to come. That's the way he said that. And then everyone knows that in Ingrid, in Hungary, it wasn't as bad as the other places, the assimilation. And the reason we also know is because of the Chassam Sofer. Chassam Sofer was such a pioneer. He came out so strong against the Maskilim and again that his how do you call it, the way the strong power that he had in his time was left for ages afterwards. And although there was the problems of the gangs that were in Poland and in Germany, from whether it was from the Zionists or from the communists or the socialists, all these kind of gangs, the effect wasn't as bad in Hungary, because over there was still the strong power of the Samsoifer, that he didn't let any kind of new styles of way of methods, anything. And this we also saw by the Holocaust, that the stronger, that in these places it was strong. It's not an accident. Why in Germany it was worse than in Poland. In Poland it was worse than Hungary. Hungary only had 1 year. In Poland it was 6 years. In Germany it was way back. So
a million and a half Hungarian Jews.
Yeah.
In a year.
In a year, but it was more sophisticated, so they were worse. But still, almost nothing left from Poland. And in Hungary, most of the Fromma Yidden that came from these places, from Hungary and from Poland, are only from Hungary, because although it was sophisticated, but it was still a small period of time. Wow. The sophistication that they had in Hungary, they had in Poland at the same time that they had it in Hungary. It's just that they came there at a later period of time. So, but people don't like to speak about this, and they want to say that it was bad, and it was it came from sins, these things, because we don't want to speak bad about the deceased, we don't want to all this whole thing. But we have to understand the truth in order to understand that there's nothing from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Everything that HaKadosh Baruch Hu did is true and right, and we don't have to understand the ways of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but at least it should be some kind of light. We should understand that this didn't come from mitzvahs. The war didn't come from mitzvahs. So they all the tzaddikim, whenever they come to this Parsha, they all mention this Aracham HaKudosh, that we should understand it, because even though we do understand, people that went through the world understand it, all they're left with the question is, and how about the tzaddikim? And how about the children? And how about this? And how about that? Why were they killed? And the answer is not the Aracham HaKudosh. The answer is we don't understand the ways of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and whatever HaKadosh Baruch Hu does is the right thing, is emes v'yushri. But we see this Aracham HaKudosh, we understand the derech of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and this at least opens a light. We should understand the way things have to happen if Chas v'Shalom do not do tshuva. Now, in the time of the Second World War, we all know that there was all the Rabbunim came out and spoke. I heard this myself when the closing Rebbe I remember he was once when he was speaking very on an Indian of tshuva very strongly, and he was crying in the middle of the drusha. He said, "I'm not going to forget." And he said the name of the city. I was in Großverdan, that's one of the cities in Galicia. I was there, and I told the people that stop doing whatever we were speaking about there, whether it was the gangs of the Zionists, or whether it was the gangs of communists, or it was of he was strong averes that was done, and I cried to them, and I told them although you're laughing from what they're speaking in Germany, but I'm telling you it's not far away, and I don't know this from the radio. I know this from the Torah, he says. If the Torah says, you should know it's not, don't play around with this. And he said also, I don't know if I'm going to be able to come back to talk again to this. It was right before the Muhammad to the city. And he said, when he said this drush, the Olam was very warm, very hot with the words that he said. But he said, but it was already too late. It wasn't enough to be able to get the whole city back in its place the way it was before these gangs came to them, because the whole younger generation were laughing at the older generation right before the war. They weren't even listening to them. Remember, my Zayda used to say, it's just a little to understand. It used to be, there were some children that had at least a little decency in them, that they didn't want to be so open in front of their fathers, in front of their Zaydas. So they used to, cover themselves up. They would sneeze at home, but when they went away, they. So my Baba, that Hashem was very. Her whole family, she saved her whole family. All the children weren't mixed up with them and she used my Baba, my mother's named after. She used to tell the children, don't play with this one, don't play with that one. So it was once a incident that she said to one of the girls, which looked very, very, very good, and she let that girl come to the house. And at one point she told her daughter, that was my Baba, don't play anymore with her. So the Baba said, why shouldn't I play with her? She's such a good girl. They had an effect on her. How do you know? So first she didn't want to say until my Baba wanted to know, because she wanted to know to learn from whom to stay away from. She said, I saw snaps here on the top. I saw the snaps on the top of her shoulder, by the shoulder. So my Baba understood already what she means. They used to do. Those that don't want to show what they do, when they came in, they had sleeves, and when they went out to play around with the boys, not talking to boys, talking like bochum. They took off this sleeve. So if they had snaps, they knew already what it meant. I'm saying a small parable. What I'm talking about is much worse than what I'm saying now. So I want to understand that the Rabbunim, the Tzaddikim, they didn't even have an effect on the younger generation. They were like smart. They felt smarter than them because they were their gangs. They're not going to let themselves with the old kind of we have new ways. Come on, let's learn like we see in several places also today. Also that there's the younger generation we can't. And we have to watch. It shouldn't cost children. We have to watch our children also. So I know on the other hand, should really say on the other side also how we see people that save themselves. It was the Babaveh Rebbe, the father of Reb Shlomo, Reb Tzim Babaveh, had a very strong chabire. It's called a chabire. Chabire means that they came together, just like they came together with bad things. The Derech HaBashem was to come together. Other called it Farbrengen, other called it Chabiris. They came together and they sang together like we're doing now, and they were mechazik with the young generation together. We're strong with our Hasidus. We're not going to pick up Chas v'Shalom these bad things. Reb Shlomo Babaveh had, Reb Tzim Babaveh had that, and a lot of Hasidus had it. Small, but not so much. And the Ger Rebbe also had it. Interesting that a story that I heard that's even printed I think it's imprinted in the Moshe Prager, which was a Ger Chusid. He put out a book, Those Who Never Yielded. Interesting about the Ger Buchim that held themselves together.